You think you know chess because you push a mop around here, old man? The words echoed through the grand tournament hall as America's top female chess champion pointed mockingly at the elderly black janitor. But what happened next would leave everyone speechless. What if the person you dismissed as beneath you held secrets that could shatter everything you believed about excellence and talent? This is the shocking true story of how one Grandmaster's cruel joke became her greatest lesson in humility. You won't believe what unfolds when assumptions meet reality. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now. Subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published news stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. The Manhattan Chess Academy gleamed under the afternoon sun, its marble floors reflecting the confidence of champions who walked these halls. Victoria Sterling swept through the entrance, her designer heels clicking rhythmically against the polished surface. At 39, she was America's golden child of chess, blonde hair with distinguished gray streaks framing a face that graced magazine covers and sponsorship deals worth millions.
MS Sterling. MS Sterling.
Reporters swarmed around her like bees to honey. How does it feel to be defending your title for the fifth consecutive year? Victoria's smile was practiced perfection. When you're the best, defending is just another day at the office. She adjusted her designer blazer, the cameras capturing every calculated movement. Inside the main tournament hall, preparations were underway for the annual Manhattan Chess Championship.
Cristal chandelier caste dramatique shadow over 64 bord arrange douze military précision.
This wasn't just any tournament, it was where legends were made and broken. Marcus Washington pushed his cleaning cart slowly between the tables, ensuring each board was spotless. At 63, his dark skin bore the lines of a life lived fully, though few here knew anything about that life. To them, he was invisible, just another part of the background, like the velvet curtains or the antique clocks. "Excuse me," a young player snapped, not looking up from his practice board.
You're blocking my light.
"My apologies," Marcus said softly, moving his cart. He paused for a moment, his experienced eyes scanning the position on the board. The young man was about to make a critical error. His bishop move would leave his king exposed in 3 moves. Marcus's fingers twitched slightly, but he said nothing and continued cleaning. Victoria entered the hall with her entourage, coaches, managers, and sponsors from tech giant industries, her primary backer. She was explaining her preparation routine when she noticed the janitor lingering near one of the boards. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her voice carrying the particular tone reserved for service staff. "No, ma'am. Just doing my job," Marcus replied, turning back to his cart. "Your job is to clean, not gawk at the boards," Victoria said, loud enough for others to hear. Several players chuckled. "These positions are probably incomprehensible to you anyway." Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he simply nodded.
Yes, ma'am.
Thomas Chun, the tech giant representative, laughed. "Maybe we should let him play a game, Victoria. Could be amusing for the sponsors, show how accessible chess is to everyone." His tone suggested he found the idea hilarious.
Victoria's eyes lit up with cruel amusement. You know what?
"That's brilliant." She turned to Marcus, speaking slowly as if to a child. "Would you like to play a game of chess with me, sir? I'll even pay you." She pulled out her wallet, $100 if you can last 5 moves. The hall had grown quiet, all eyes on the scene unfolding. Some players smirked, others looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. Marcus set down his cleaning supplies and straightened his back. For the first time, he looked directly into Victoria's eyes. 5 moves. "That's right," Victoria said, waving the $100 bill.
5 will move before Ishek Matthew.
"Should be easy money for you." "I don't want your money," Marcus said quietly. Victoria laughed, a tinkling sound devoid of warmth.
Oh, come now. Don't be pro.
Think of it as educational. You can tell your grandchildren you once played against a grandmaster. "If you insist on this game," Marcus said, his voice steady, "then I accept. But keep your money." The crowd buzzed with excitement. Someone started filming on their phone. This would definitely go viral. Famous Grandmaster humiliates janitor. The content practically wrote itself.
Someone get aboard.
Victoria called out, thoroughly enjoying herself. Let's give our friend here his 15 minutes of fame. As assistants scrambled to set up a board in the center of the hall, Marcus rolled up his sleeves. Nobody noticed the slight smile that played at the corners of his mouth. Nobody saw the fire that had ignited in his eyes, a fire that had been dormant for 30 years. Victoria Sterling thought she was about to teach a lesson in humility. She had no idea she was about to receive one. The tournament hall transformed into an amphitheater of anticipation. Word spread quickly through the building. Victoria Sterling was about to play the janitor. Players abandoned their preparation, sponsors pulled out phones, and even the usually stoic arbiters gathered to watch. "This is highly irregular," tournament director Harold Whitman protested, approaching Victoria with worried eyes. "The insurance implications alone." "Oh, Harold, lighten up," Victoria waved him off. "Think of the publicity. Grandmaster makes chess accessible to all. My sponsors will love it." She gestured to Thomas Chun, who was already coordinating with his marketing team. Marcus stood quietly amid the chaos, hands clasped behind his back. His calmness seemed to unsettle some observers. Shouldn't he be nervous? Intimidated? Instead, he watched the board being set up with an expression of quiet satisfaction. "We'll need to explain the rules to him," Victoria announced to her assistant, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The pieces, how they move, the objective of the game." "I understand the rules," Marcus interrupted softly. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Oh? You've played before?" "Once or twice." The crowd chuckled.
Victoria's smile widened.
"Wonderful. This might last 6 moves instead of 5. Cameras positioned themselves strategically. The tech giant social media team was live tweeting. #Grandmaster Grace teaching chess to the masses had already started trending. "Would you prefer white or black?" Marcus asked. Victoria nearly choked on her latte. "You're offering me choice of color? How generous." More laughter from the crowd. "I'll take white, naturally. Champions always play white in exhibitions." They sat down at the board, the contrast striking, Victoria in her designer outfit, radiating confidence and entitlement, Marcus in his janitor's uniform, calm as still water. The crowd pressed closer, phones raised. Victoria's coach, international master Robert Hayes, whispered in her ear, "Don't humiliate him too badly. We want this to look educational, not cruel." "Don't worry," Victoria said loudly.
Il make it instructive.
"Our friend here might learn something." Marcus's hands rested on his knees. Several people noticed they were surprisingly steady, working hands, yes, but with a particular grace in their stillness. He studied the board with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world. "Whenever you're ready," Victoria said, reaching for her king's pawn. She played 1e4 with a flourish, the central pawn thrust that had begun millions of games. "This is called the king's pawn opening," she explained condescendingly. "Very common, very classical." Marcus nodded slightly. His hand moved to his knight. Without hesitation, he played nf6. A few knowledgeable spectators exchanged glances.
The Talekin défense?
Interesting choice for a beginner. Most would mirror with e5. "That's an unusual response," Victoria said, slightly surprised. "But not incorrect. This is called Alekine's defense, everyone. Named after a former world champion." She played 2d5, attacking the knight. Marcus's reply came instantly, "nd5. "He's not even thinking," someone whispered. "Probably doesn't understand he needs to," another replied. But Robert Hayes frowned. The moves were too quick, too confident. The way Marcus placed the pieces, firm but gentle, centered perfectly on the squares. These weren't the movements of a casual player. Victoria continued her commentary, playing 3d4.
"Now I'm controlling the center."
Center control is fundamental in chess. Marcus played d6. The position was transforming into something sophisticated. Victoria's next moves came slightly slower, her educational commentary becoming less frequent. The knight dance that followed, c4, nb6, e6, showed a deep understanding of pawn structures. Interesting, Victoria muttered, then louder, our friend seems to have some familiarity with opening theory. Marcus remained silent, his dark eyes focused entirely on the position. When Victoria developed her bishop to d3, he responded with c5, striking at her center. The crowd had grown larger. Even players from the master section had wandered over. The expected quick slaughter wasn't materializing. Instead, a complex middle game position was emerging. The position is equal, someone whispered in disbelief. Thomas Chun lowered his phone. This wasn't going according to script. The marketing team exchanged worried glances.
Victoria's move came slower now.
The condescending explanations had stopped entirely. She studied the board with genuine concentration, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the table, a nervous habit she thought she'd eliminated years ago. Marcus pushed a pawn to f6, a move that would have looked weakening to an amateur but opened lines of attack against Victoria's king. His preparation was subtle, patient, like a python slowly coiling around its prey. This is taking too long, someone in the crowd muttered. But they couldn't look away. Victoria looked up at Marcus for the first time since the game began, really looked at him. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes, there was something there. Knowledge.
Understanding. And something else.
Hunger.
The $100 bill est forgotten on the table, fluttering slightly in the air conditioning.
Around them, the crowd pressed closer, sensing that something unexpected was happening. Victoria Sterling, 5-time national champion, had expected a lamb to the slaughter. Instead, she found herself facing a wolf. The middle game emerged like a photograph developing in solution, slowly at first, then with startling clarity. Victoria found herself in a position she hadn't expected, thinking. Actually thinking against the janitor. Marcus moved his bishop to g4, pinning Victoria's knight to her queen. The move came with the same unhurried precision as all his others, his weathered hands placing the piece dead center on the square. That's actually quite good, someone whispered from the crowd.
Victoria felt a flicker of irritation.
She'd planned to use this game to demonstrate basic principles, perhaps show a classic checkmate pattern. Instead, she was calculating variations, her mind working through possibilities like she was facing a peer. She broke the pin with b2, a solid response. Marcus immediately played nd5, centralizing his knight with tempo. The spectators had grown quiet. The expected laughter and commentary had died away, replaced by the intense silence that accompanies serious chess. Several titled players pushed through the crowd for a better view. Look at his hand position, an elderly master observed quietly. Perfect.
Like Petrosian S.
Victoria didn't hear the comment. Her world had narrowed to 64 squares. She played nf3, developing naturally, but sweat beaded on her forehead despite the air conditioning. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was supposed to blunder by now, make some obvious amateur mistake she could gently correct for the cameras.
Marcus castled kingside. The move sent a ripple through the crowd.
Queenside castling in this position was aggressive, purposeful. It showed long-term planning, an understanding of the coming attack. Victoria's coach, Robert, stepped forward involuntarily. Did he just? Someone started. Quiet. Victoria snapped, immediately regretting the outburst. She forced a smile. Sorry, just concentrating on making this instructive. But there was nothing instructive about what followed. Marcus launched an attack on the kingside with h5, then g5. Each pawn thrust came with mechanical precision, like hammering nails into a coffin. Victoria found herself on the defensive, her pieces tangled, her king feeling exposed despite being safely castled. This is impossible, Thomas Chun muttered to his assistant. He's a janitor. We checked his background, Marcus Washington, employed here for 8 years, no chess rating, no tournament history. Sir, the assistant whispered urgently, showing him her phone. Look at this comment on the live stream. Someone says he reminds them of a player from Detroit, someone called. Not now. Chen hissed. On the board, the position had transformed into a work of violent art. Marcus sacrificed a knight with nxf2, a move that drew gasps from the crowd. Victoria stared at the position, calculating frantically. If she took the knight, qh4 plus followed, and her king would be dragged into the center. If she didn't take it. Her hand hovered over the king. 30 seconds passed. A minute. In a tournament, she would have had time to think, but here, under the weight of hundreds of eyes, thousands watching online, her mind felt foggy. She took the knight. Marcus's queen swept to h4 with the inevitability of thunder following lightning. Check. Victoria's king stumbled to e2, the only legal move. The pieces seemed to mock her own king exposed in the center while the janitor's monarch sat safely on c8, watching the execution from afar.
My God, Someone breathed.
He's destroying her. Destroying was the right word. Marcus's pieces coordinated like a symphony orchestra, each contributing to a melody of destruction. His rooks swept to the open files, his bishops carved diagonals through Victoria's position like scalpels through flesh. Robert Hayes grabbed his phone, typing frantically. Jim, you need to see this. Remember that player you told me about from the 70s? The one from Detroit who? But his message was interrupted by another gasp from the crowd. Marcus had just played 1+ rupee, a quiet move that nonetheless tightened the noose.
Victoria's king had nowhere to hide.
Think, Victoria commanded herself.
You're a Grandmaster. 5-time national champion. You don't lose too.
But the words died in her mind. Labels meant nothing to the wooden pieces. They didn't care about titles or tournaments or sponsorship deals. She played kd3, trudging her king forward. Other moves lost immediately. This at least prolonged the game, though she knew, everyone knew, it was hopeless. Marcus looked up from the board for the first time since the game began. His eyes met Victoria's, and in them she saw no mockery, no triumph.
Only a deep, abiding love for the game itself.
Your move, he said quietly, the first words he'd spoken since accepting the challenge. Victoria's hand trembled as she reached for a piece. Around them, the crowd held its breath, phones forgotten, live streams capturing a moment that would ripple through the chess world like a stone thrown into still water. The janitor waited patiently, a grandmaster in all but name, while the titled Grandmaster searched desperately for a move that didn't exist. The hunter had become the hunted, and everyone watching knew there would be no escape. Victoria's hand trembled as she moved her bishop to block the check. The piece clicked against the board with a hollow sound that seemed to echo through the silent hall. Marcus responded instantly, bf5+, forcing her king further into the open.
Dear Lord, an elderly voice cut through the silence.
International master Dmitry Volkov, visiting from the Russian Chess Federation, pushed through the crowd, his face pale. It cannot be. What is it, Dmitry? Someone asked. But Volkov wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on Marcus, studying the way he held his pieces, the particular rhythm of his moves. The timing, the style. I've seen this before.
Détroit, 1979. Victoria barely heard the commotion.
Her world had shrunk to the nightmare unfolding on the board. Every move she made seemed to worsen her position. Marcus's pieces swarmed around her exposed king like wolves circling wounded prey. Check, Marcus said softly, playing qg3+. Victoria's king stumbled to c2. She knew the position was hopeless, but pride kept her playing. Somewhere in the crowd, she heard nervous laughter, not at Marcus now, but at the absurdity of the situation. The Detroit Devil, Volkov whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. That's what we called him. He appeared from nowhere in the late 70s, dominated every tournament he entered. Street player turned phenomenon. You're joking, Robert Hayes said, but his face had gone white. That's an urban legend. The undefeated player who vanished. Legend. Volkov pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen. I played him once.
Simule in Détroit, 1981.
He beat 15 masters simultaneously, blindfolded. I lasted 43 moves, longest of anyone that day. On the board, Marcus played rc1+, another precise blow. Victoria's king fled to b3, driven like a refugee from square to square. The pattern was clear to any competent player. This was no lucky streak. This was mastery. Show them, Volkov commanded his phone, pulling up an old chess database.
Here, Detroit City Championship, 1978-1982. Winner, Monsieur Washington.
Every
Single.
year. The crowd pressed closer, those with phones frantically searching. Ancient tournament reports surfaced, grainy newspaper photos emerged. A younger Marcus Washington, intense and focused, sitting across from defeated opponents. The Devil's Gambit, someone read from an old Chess Life article. Washington's unique attacking style has earned him a fearsome reputation. His sacrificial play borders on the supernatural. Thomas Chun looked sick. His marketing team had stopped filming, the viral content transformed into something else entirely, a public humiliation of their primary sponsored player. Victoria played QF5, desperately trying to generate counterplay. Marcus barely glanced at the board before responding, QB4+. Check. Again. Why did he stop? Someone asked Volkov. If he was that good. His wife, Volkov said quietly.
Sarah Washington.
She died in 1993. Cancer. He never played competitive chess again. Just vanished. The crowd fell silent, absorbing this revelation. They looked at Marcus with new eyes, not a janitor, but a grieving widower who'd walked away from the game he loved. On the board, Victoria's king had been driven to A2, cowering in the corner. Her pieces were scattered, uncoordinated, while Marcus's army moved with lethal precision. She had perhaps 5 moves left, maybe fewer. 30 years, Robert Hayes said wonderingly. He hasn't played seriously in 30 years, and he's doing this to a current Grandmaster? Chess doesn't forget, Volkov replied. And neither do real players. Victoria looked up at Marcus, seeing him clearly for the first time. The lines on his face told stories she'd never bothered to imagine. The hands that pushed mops and emptied trash cans had once danced across chessboards, creating magic that made masters weep. You knew, she said quietly. When I challenged you, you knew what would happen. Marcus met her gaze. You insisted, he said simply. Around them, phones buzzed with notifications. The chess world was exploding. Forums lit up with discussions, old games were being analyzed, and everyone wanted to know, how had the Detroit Devil ended up pushing a mop in Manhattan? Check, Marcus announced, playing RC2+. Victoria's king retreated to A1, pressed into the absolute corner. She had no pieces able to help, no tactics to save her. The woman who'd offered $100 for 5 moves was about to lose in under 30. I resign, she whispered, but her hand wouldn't move to knock over the king. Pride, shock, and something else, awe, kept her frozen. Marcus waited patiently. He'd waited 30 years. A few more seconds meant nothing. Around them, the crowd held its breath, witnesses to the resurrection of a legend and the humbling of a champion. The Detroit Devil had returned, and he'd announced himself in a way the chess world would never forget. No, Victoria said suddenly, her voice stronger. I won't resign. If you're going to beat me, you'll do it on the board. A flicker of respect crossed Marcus's weathered features. He nodded slowly, then turned his attention back to the position. What followed was a chess lesson that those present would discuss for years.
QB1+.
Check. Victoria's king, already pressed against the edge of the board, had only one square.
K3.
Look at the coordination, Volkov narrated for the mesmerized crowd. Every piece has a purpose. This isn't just winning, it's artistic destruction. Marcus played RC3+, driving the king further into the corner. The sequence that followed was like watching a master painter at work, each brush stroke deliberate and beautiful. Victoria's king was herded from square to square, her remaining pieces helpless spectators to their monarch's demise. I remember now, an older master said suddenly.
Chicago, 1983. The Midwest Open.
He beat 3 grandmasters in a row, all with the same opening system. They called it the Washington variation. The what? Thomas Chun demanded, his corporate composure finally cracking. He revolutionized the king's Indian defense, the master explained. Added ideas that were 20 years ahead of their time. Kasparov himself studied Washington's games. On the board, Marcus demonstrated why. His pieces flowed like water, adapting to every defensive try. When Victoria blocked one attack, another materialized from an unexpected angle. It wasn't brute force, it was chess as art form. Sarah used to come to every tournament, Volkov said softly, his eyes distant with memory. She'd sit in the corner with her knitting, and after each game, win or lose, Marcus would go straight to her. They'd analyze the game together. She was quite strong herself, you know. Women's champion of Michigan. The crowd listened, entranced by this glimpse into the past. On the board, Victoria's defeat approached with mathematical certainty, but the story unfolding was equally compelling. When she got sick, Volkov continued, Marcus withdrew from the World Championship qualifier. He was seeded third, almost certain to make the candidates tournament. But he walked away. Said some things mattered more than chess. Marcus played QB3+, checking the exposed king once more. Victoria moved Ka4, the only legal response, her piece movements mechanical now. She was playing out of respect, letting him finish what he'd started. After she died, he just disappeared. Some said he'd moved to New York, but nobody knew for sure. To think he's been here all along, cleaning up after players not fit to tie his shoes. Why? Someone asked. Why work as a janitor when he could have been coaching, teaching? Maybe, Robert Hayes said quietly, he wanted to be near the game without being in it. Grief does strange things to people. Marcus looked up briefly at the mention of grief, his eyes holding depths of pain that made several observers look away. Then he returned to the board, playing Ra1+. Victoria's king fled to b5, driven up the board now. The end was near, and everyone knew it. But something had changed in the room's atmosphere. The initial carnival mood had transformed into something resembling a wake, or perhaps a resurrection. He taught kids in Detroit, another voice added.
Free leçons in the community center.
Several of his students became masters. Maurice Ashley trained with him before becoming the first black Grandmaster. Thomas Chun had given up on damage control. His phone rang incessantly, sponsors, media outlets, his boss, but he ignored them all, transfixed by the historic moment unfolding. On the board, Marcus played QB4+, and Victoria's king staggered to c6. The hunt was nearly over. Her remaining pieces, a rook and bishop, stood like mourners at a funeral, unable to intervene. Mate in 4, someone whispered. 3, another corrected. Marcus played QC5+. As Victoria's hand moved to respond, phones throughout the hall buzzed with notifications. The chess world had awakened. Grandmasters worldwide were watching the live stream, commenting in disbelief.
The hashtag Détroit des Villes returns was trending globally.
Mr. Washington, a young player, called out respectfully. Will you play in tournaments again? Marcus didn't answer, focused entirely on finishing the game with the same quiet dignity he'd shown throughout. But something in his posture suggested the question had reached him, stirring thoughts long buried. Victoria moved her king to d7, knowing the end was imminent. She'd entered this game expecting to teach a lesson about hierarchy, about knowing one's place. Instead, she'd learned one about assumptions, about the danger of judging by appearances. The Detroit Devil raised his queen for the final sequence, and the Manhattan Chess Academy held its collective breath, waiting for the legend to complete his masterpiece. Marcus played QD5+, and the geometry of destruction became clear to everyone watching. Victoria's king retreated to e8, the only square available, back where it had started the game. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, driven full circle by the man she tried to humiliate. Watch carefully, Volkov instructed the younger players, pressing close.
You're witnessing something special.
This isn't just winning, this is teaching. Indeed, Marcus had transformed the chessboard into a classroom. Each move demonstrated a principle: coordination, timing, spatial advantage. He could have delivered checkmate several moves ago, but instead chose instructive patterns that would benefit those watching.
RC8+.
The rook swept across the board like Judgment Day. Victoria's king fled to f7, stumbling toward the center. Her face had lost all color, but she maintained her composure, playing each move with the dignity Marcus had afforded her by continuing the game. In Detroit, an older master recounted, he once played a game that made it into every major chess publication. The immortal Zugzwang, they called it. Put his opponent in a position where any move led to disaster. Even Tal called it brilliant. Mikhail Tal praised him. A young international master gasped. The magician of Riga sent him a personal letter. Marcus had it framed in his apartment. Volkov caught himself, glancing at Marcus with something like guilt. We stayed in touch for a few years after Sarah passed. He showed it to me once. On the board, Marcus played QE6+, centralizing his queen with devastating effect. Victoria's king had nowhere safe to go. KG7 was forced, the king climbing up the board like a condemned man ascending scaffolding. That's when Marcus did something unexpected. He looked up at the crowd of young players and spoke, his voice carrying the authority of decades of study. "Do you see why KG7 is forced?" he asked. "What happens on KF8? QF7 hashtag, several voices answered immediately. And on KG8? RC7 threatens mate on G7, a teenage prodigy replied.
The king can't escape.
Marcus nodded approvingly. Good. Now watch what happens when pieces work together. He played RC7+, and suddenly the crowd understood. This wasn't just a random checking sequence, it was a perfectly orchestrated dance. Each piece movement built on the previous one, creating a web from which there was no escape. Victoria moved KH6, her king seeking shelter at the edge of the board.
The $100 bill still est on the table. Forgotten and irrelevant.
What was happening transcended money or pride. The bishop, Marcus said, not as a move announcement but as a teaching moment. It's been waiting on F5 for 6 moves. Why? The crowd studied the position intently. Then understanding dawned on several faces simultaneously. To prevent the king from escaping via G6, a young girl exclaimed. Marcus smiled, the first genuine warmth he'd shown since the game began. Exactly. Patience in attack is as important as aggression. Every piece must have purpose. He played QF7, quietly, almost gently. The position was now a work of art, every piece perfectly placed. Victoria stared at the board, seeing not just her impending defeat but the vast gulf between her understanding and his. You could have won 10 moves ago, she said quietly. Winning was never the point, Marcus replied.
Teaching is.
The crowd absorbed this in silence. Here was a man who'd been mocked, humiliated, offered money like a performing seal, and his response was to transform the moment into a lesson that would benefit everyone present. Mate in 2, someone whispered, but they were wrong. Mate in 1, Marcus corrected gently. After any move. It was true. Victoria's king on H6 was trapped. Any move by black allowed QG7 hashtag. The perfect zugzwang, the position where having to move meant death. In chess, as in life, Marcus said, addressing the room now, the most powerful positions often look quiet. Control comes not from noise but from understanding. Not from titles but from knowledge. He looked directly at Victoria as he said this, and she had the grace to lower her eyes. This position, he continued, was reached by Steinitz against Blackburn in 1876. I'm merely showing you something beautiful that already existed. Chess belongs to no one and everyone. Phones captured every word. The livestream comments had shifted from mockery to awe, from disbelief to inspiration. The Detroit Devil wasn't just winning a game, he was teaching a generation. Victoria looked at her position one last time. Her hand moved to her king, hesitated, then tipped it over with quiet dignity. I resign, she said formally. Then, meeting Marcus's eyes, thank you for the lesson. The room erupted, but Marcus remained seated, calmly resetting the pieces to their starting positions. His hands moved with the same care he used when cleaning the academy, treating each piece with respect regardless of its perceived value. The lesson was complete, but the implications were just beginning to ripple outward. The applause was deafening, but Marcus remained still, his weathered hands resting on his knees. Victoria sat across from him, her fallen king lying on its side like a toppled monument to hubris. For a long moment, neither moved.
Monsieur Washington, a young voice peeped up from the crowd.
It was Anna Chun, Thomas's daughter, barely 13 but already rated 2000.
Will you analyze the game with us?
Marcus looked at the girl, then at the expectant faces surrounding him. These were the same people who had laughed at him moments ago, who had seen him only as a janitor, beneath their notice. But in their eyes now was something different, hunger for knowledge. Bring your sets, he said simply. What followed was perhaps the most remarkable postmortem in the Academy's history. Players scrambled for boards, setting up the initial position. Marcus rose from his seat, slowly, his joints protesting after years of physical labor, and began to walk among them. "The opening," he began, his voice taking on a teacher's cadence. "Miss Sterling played the king's pawn, the most classical beginning. But classical doesn't mean best. It means tested. Now, why did I choose the Alekhine defense?
On shot up like flowers seeking sun.
Because it's provocative?" one student suggested. "Deeper than that," Marcus said. "In chess, as in life, when someone believes they're superior, they often overextend. The Alekhine invites white to chase the knight, to grab space. But what happens when you grab too much? You create weaknesses," Victoria said quietly. She'd remained at the demonstration board, still processing what had happened. "I pushed too hard, too fast." Marcus nodded. Chess mirrors character. An arrogant player makes arrogant moves. He moved through the game, explaining each decision, each moment where the tide had turned. The crowd had swelled to include nearly everyone in the building. "Move 15, he said, setting up a critical position. "Miss Sterling played BD3. Strong players, tell me, what would you play here?" Several hands rose, offering suggestions. Marcus listened to each, nodding thoughtfully. "All reasonable," he said, "but I played F6.
Why attack the center when you're behind in development?
Anyone." "Because," Victoria said suddenly, understanding flooding her features, "you weren't behind in development. You were setting a trap. If I take on F6, the G-file opens and my king becomes vulnerable." "Now you're seeing," Marcus said approvingly. "Chess isn't about what is. It's about what will be. You must see not just the board but the future board." For 30 minutes, he transformed the Academy's main hall into a classroom. Grandmasters took notes. Children asked questions that Marcus answered with patience and depth. He showed variations, explained psychological moments, demonstrated how chess was both art and war. Mr. Washington, Harold Whitman, the tournament director, finally worked up the courage to approach. Would you consider teaching here? We could arrange." "I have a job," Marcus said simply. "I clean. It's honest work." "But your talent?" "My talent doesn't disappear when I push a mop," Marcus said. "It doesn't diminish when I empty trash. Too many people think dignity comes from what you do instead of how you do it." He returned to the demonstration board for the final position. Miss Sterling showed courage by playing to the end. In chess, resignation is acceptable when the position is hopeless. But she made me prove it. That's the mark of a true competitor. Victoria stood, and for the first time since she'd entered the building, she looked uncertain. "Mr. Washington, I owe you an apology. What I did, trying to humiliate you for entertainment, was inexcusable." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "Apologies are words. Change is action. You want to make amends? Learn from this. Next time you see someone in a service uniform, remember, you don't know their story." The crowd was silent, absorbing the weight of his words. "One more thing," Marcus said, addressing the room. "Chess is called the royal game, but it belongs to everyone. Street players, club players, grandmasters, we all serve the same 64 squares.
Never let anyone tell you you don't belong."
He began walking toward his cleaning cart, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. But before he could reach it, Anna Chen ran forward. "Wait," she called.
Will you play again?
"In tournaments." Marcus paused, his hand on the cart handle. For a moment his careful composure cracked, and they glimpsed the pain beneath. 30 years of grief, of absence, of a life lived in the shadow of loss. "I don't know," he said honestly. "For now, I have floors to clean." As he wheeled his cart toward the exit, the entire room burst into spontaneous applause. But Marcus didn't turn around. He'd said what needed saying, taught what needed teaching. Behind him, Victoria Sterling stood among the scattered pieces of her pride, beginning to understand that she'd received something far more valuable than a chess lesson. She'd been given a mirror, and the reflection would haunt her for years to come. The maintenance door hadn't fully closed behind Marcus when the hall erupted into chaos. Phones rang incessantly, social media exploded, and chess websites crashed under the traffic.
The Détroit des Villes Return was the story of the decade.
Mr. Whitman, Thomas Chun cornered the tournament director, his corporate mask finally shattered. We need to control this narrative. Our sponsorship is the least of your concerns, Whitman replied coldly. You just broadcast the humiliation of your top player to millions. Meanwhile, Victoria stood frozen at the demonstration board, staring at the final position. The pieces seemed to mock her, the white king cowering in the corner while black's forces dominated the board. It was more than a chess position, it was a metaphor for everything that had just transpired. Victoria, Robert Hayes approached cautiously. We should go. The media will want statements. Did you know? She asked quietly. About who he was.
Robert hésita-t-elle.
I'd heard rumors. Stories. But I thought they were exaggerated.
A Janitor ou Bitfischer in a simule?
An undefeated tournament player who walked away? It sounded like chess mythology. Except it wasn't. Victoria began collecting the pieces, her movements automatic. Every move he made, it was like playing against history itself. No, like playing against someone who understood chess at a level I can barely comprehend. Around them, players analyzed the game on their phones, on boards, in heated discussions. The consensus was unanimous. It wasn't just that Marcus had won, but how he'd won. The psychological domination, the technical precision, the transformation of humiliation into education.
Miss Sterling.
A reporter had breached the informal security.
Jennifer Walsh, Chess Life. Can you comment what just happened?
Victoria turned, and for the first time in her professional career, she had no prepared statement, no polished soundbite. I attempted to humiliate a man based solely on his job. Instead, he showed all of us, what real mastery looks like. Both in chess and in character. Do you think he'll return to competitive play? I hope so, Victoria said, surprising herself with the honesty. The chess world is poorer without him. But that's his decision, and unlike my earlier behavior today, I'll respect whatever he chooses. More reporters pressed forward, but Harold Whitman intervened. The tournament will resume in 30 minutes.
All non-participants must clear the hall.
As the crowd dispersed, Dmitry Volkov remained at one of the analysis boards, replaying the game. Young players surrounded him, eager for insights. You see this move, RC1+? Volkov positioned the pieces.
This is pure Détroit des Villes.
He had 3 ways to win, but he chose the most instructive. Even while destroying his opponent, he was teaching. Why did he quit? Anna Chen asked. If he was so good. Volkov's face softened. Imagine you love 2 things more than life itself, chess and your spouse. Then one is taken from you. Could you continue with the other, knowing every victory, every beautiful combination, you could never share with them again? The children fell silent, beginning to understand. Meanwhile, 3 floors up, Marcus Washington methodically cleaned the executive conference room. His phone, an ancient flip model, buzzed constantly in his pocket. He ignored it, focusing on his work. The mahogany table reflected his image, an old man in a janitor's uniform, alone with his thoughts.
A knock interrupted.
Come in, he called without looking up. Harold Whitman entered, closing the door behind him.
Marcus, Monsieur Washington.
I had to find you. My shift ends at 6, Marcus said. I'll have all the rooms ready before tomorrow's rounds. That's not why I'm here. Whitman sat down, something he'd never done in Marcus's presence before. The chess world is going insane.
You're trending worldwide.
Kasparov himself tweeted about your game. Marcus continued cleaning. The young lady's question, about playing again. I've been thinking about it. And Sarah loved chess, Marcus said quietly.
Loved watching me play.
Said I was poetry in motion. He smiled at the memory. But when she got sick, chess became unimportant. How could I care about controlling squares when I couldn't control her cancer? Whitman remained silent, letting him speak. After she died, I couldn't look at a board without seeing her in the corner, knitting, smiling when I found a good move. So I walked away. Came here because... He gestured at the building. Being near chess without playing was like being near her memory without drowning in it. And now... Marcus finally looked up. That young woman today, Miss Sterling. She reminded me why I used to teach. Not for the strong players, but for the ones who needed to learn humility, perspective. Sarah always said my gift wasn't just playing chess, but showing others how to see it properly. So you'll play again? I'll think about it, Marcus said. But for now, I have work to finish. Floors don't clean themselves. Whitman stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, having you here, even just cleaning, has been an honor. We just didn't know it. After he left, Marcus returned to his work. But for the first time in 30 years, the weight on his shoulders felt a little lighter. In teaching Victoria Sterling humility, he'd remembered something Sarah had always told him. Your gift isn't yours to keep, Marcus. It's yours to share. The Detroit Devil wasn't ready to return to tournament play. Not yet. But perhaps, he was ready to teach again. 6 months had passed since the day that shook the chess establishment. The video of Marcus Washington's destruction of Victoria Sterling had garnered over 50 million views, spawning countless analysis videos, articles, and debates about hidden genius and social prejudice. But in the basement of the Brownsville Community Center, none of that mattered. Knight to f6, 8-year-old Jamal announced proudly, executing the move Marcus had taught him. Good, Marcus said from his position at the front of the room. But tell me why. Because it attacks the e4 pawn and develops my piece, Jamal recited. And it keeps my options open for castling kingside or queenside. Marcus smiled. The room was packed, 40 children where 6 months ago there had been none. Word had spread through the neighborhood, the Detroit Devil was teaching again, and he was teaching for free.
Monsieur Washington. A familiar voice called from the doorway.
Victoria Sterling stood there, drastically different from 6 months ago. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. She wore simple jeans and a chess club t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. The children turned to stare. They all knew who she was. Marcus had used their game as a teaching tool, showing how pride could blind even the strongest players. Miss Sterling, Marcus acknowledged. Children, please continue your games. Remember, touch move rule applies. He walked to the door where Victoria waited, a cardboard box in her arms. I hope I'm not intruding, she said. I brought some chess sets. New ones.
The keys deserve better than those all plastic pièces.
Marcus peered into the box. Beautiful wooden sets, the kind that cost hundreds of dollars each. That's generous, but... Please, Victoria interrupted. It's not charity. It's tuition. I was hoping... She took a breath. I was hoping I could assist. With teaching. I've been volunteering at a school in Queens, but I'd like to help here too. If you'll have me. Marcus studied her for a long moment. The arrogance that had defined her was gone, replaced by something quieter, more genuine. Can you teach without telling them about your titles? He asked. Without mentioning your rating or tournament victories? I haven't mentioned them in months, Victoria said. I've learned that titles mean nothing if you can't explain why a pin is stronger than a fork to a 7-year-old.
A small smile crossed Marcus's face.
Then you've learned more than I thought.
Come.
They walked into the room where children bent over boards in concentration. The scene was chaotic, pieces knocked over, illegal moves attempted, arguments over rules, but there was joy here, pure and uncomplicated. Everyone, this is Miss Victoria, Marcus announced. She's going to help us learn.
What do we say? Welcome, Miss Victoria. The children chorused.
Now, Marcus continued, who can show Miss Victoria the opening we learned last week? Dozens of hands shot up. Victoria moved among them, kneeling beside boards, offering gentle corrections and encouragement. Marcus watched, noting how she praised effort over results, how she asked questions instead of lecturing. She's different, Jamal observed, appearing at Marcus's side. She was mean in that video. Now she's nice. People can change, Marcus said. Chess teaches us that every position, no matter how bad, contains the seed of improvement. The same is true for people. As the afternoon progressed, more visitors arrived. Robert Hayes brought a dozen chess clocks. Harold Whitman delivered a contribution from the Manhattan Chess Academy, funds to cover the community center's rent for a year. Even Thomas Chen appeared, awkwardly offering corporate sponsorship that Marcus politely declined. "We don't need sponsors," he explained. "We need commitment. Come teach once a week, and that's worth more than any check." By evening, the room had transformed into an impromptu chess festival. Masters played simmels against the children, parents learned alongside their kids, and at the center of it all, Marcus moved like a conductor orchestrating a symphony. "You know," Victoria said during a quiet moment, "I've won 5 national championships, but this, teaching Keisha how to mate with a queen and rook, feels more important than any of them." "Now you understand," Marcus replied. "Chess isn't about winning. It's about sharing."
Sarah Knudet.
"She'd have liked what we're building here." "Tell me about her," Victoria said.
If you don't mind. Marcus's eyes grew distant. She talked kindergarten.
Said 5-year-olds and chess players were similar, both needed to learn patience and planning. She'd have loved these kids. Would have known all their names by the second class, remembered their birthdays, their struggles. "She taught you well," Victoria observed.
You do all those things.
"I try," Marcus said simply. "It's how I honor her memory. Not by hiding from chess, but by sharing it the way she shared everything, with love and without judgment." As the session ended and children reluctantly packed up their pieces, Anna Chun approached with her father. "Mr. Washington," Thomas said formally, "I owe you an apology. What I did 6 months ago." "Is 6 months ago," Marcus interrupted. "What matters is today. And today, your daughter wants to help teach. That's payment enough for any past debt." The center slowly emptied, but Marcus remained, resetting boards for tomorrow's class. Victoria stayed to help, working in companionable silence. "They're calling you the chess prophet now," she said eventually. "There's a movement to get you inducted into the Hall of Fame." Marcus chuckled.
Prophet proclame tous from mountaintop.
"I just teach kids how pieces move. The rest, the life lessons, the character building, that comes from the game itself." As they finished the last board, Victoria asked the question that the entire chess world wanted answered: "Will you ever play competitively again?" Marcus considered this, then shook his head.
My war days are over.
"Now I'm building something better, players who'll surpass anything I ever achieved. That's my new game, and it's one where everyone can win." They turned off the lights and locked up.
Outside, the Brooklyn streets humid with evening energy.
Somewhere in this neighborhood, 40 children were dreaming about chess, their minds full of possibilities Marcus had planted.
The Detroit Devil might never play another tournament game.
But his greatest victories were just beginning. 1 year after the fateful game, the Manhattan Chess Academy hosted its first annual Sarah Washington Memorial Youth Tournament. The name had been Marcus's only condition when the Academy proposed honoring him, honor her instead. The tournament hall buzzed with controlled chaos. 300 children from across New York's 5 boroughs filled the space, their excitement barely contained. But this wasn't the usual elite gathering. Entry was free, equipment provided, and meals included. Every child from Marcus's program was there. Nervous? Victoria asked Jamal, who sat at board 1 for the under 10 section. "Mr. Washington says nerves mean you care," Jamal replied, carefully arranging his pieces. "And caring is the first step to improving."
Victoria smiled.
In the past year, she'd found more joy in teaching these children than in her entire competitive career. She'd even resigned from 2 prestigious tournaments to avoid missing Saturday classes at the community center.
Miss Sterling.
A reporter approached. "Could we get a quick interview about your involvement?" "I'm not Miss Sterling today," Victoria interrupted gently. "I'm just a coach."
Please focus on the children.
Across the hall, Marcus moved among the boards in his familiar janitor's uniform. He'd refused the Academy's offer of formal attire, insisting he was still an employee, not a guest of honor. But everyone knew the truth. This was his tournament, his vision made real. 30 seconds. the chief arbiter announced. Marcus found his position near the wall, where he could observe without interfering. This was their moment, not his. But as the children settled into their games, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. 40 kids from Brownsville, competing against the city's best, holding their own. "You did this," Harold Whitman said, joining him. "A year ago, these kids didn't know how knights moved. Now look at them." "Chess did this," Marcus corrected. "I just opened the door." As the rounds progressed, a pattern emerged. The community center children weren't just participating, they were excelling. Jamal won his first 3 games. Keisha, who'd learned to read through chess notation, upset the 3rd seed. Even little Maria, who still sometimes moved bishops like rooks, managed a draw against a rated player. "How?" Thomas Chin asked, genuinely bewildered. His daughter Anna was analyzing games, equally amazed. 1 year of lessons shouldn't produce this level of play. "You're thinking like a businessman," Victoria said, passing by. "Marcus doesn't teach chess. He teaches confidence. Purpose. The belief that a kid from the projects can sit across from anyone and compete as equals. Once they believe that, the chess part is easy." During the lunch break, something unexpected happened. An elderly woman entered the hall, moving slowly but purposefully. She wore a simple dress and carried a worn photo album. "Excuse me," she asked a volunteer.
I'm looking for Marcus Washington.
Word spread quickly, and soon Marcus was walking toward her, his face a mixture of confusion and recognition. "Dorothy," he said uncertainly.
Sarah assisté.
"Hello, Marcus," Dorothy replied, her voice warm. "I hope you don't mind. I heard about what you're doing here."
Y a tout comme.
They embraced, 2 people connected by shared loss and love. The hall, normally echoing with noise, fell silent out of respect. "She would be so proud," Dorothy said, loud enough for others to hear. "Sarah always said you'd find your way back. That your gift was too important to stay hidden." She opened the photo album, revealing pictures of a younger Marcus and Sarah at chess tournaments, in their home, living a life full of love and chess. "I thought the children should see these," Dorothy continued. "Should know that their teacher was loved, and that love is what makes him such a good teacher now." Marcus's eyes glistened, but he maintained his composure. Would you like to present the awards? Sarah should be part of this day." "I'd be honored." The tournament resumed with renewed energy. Children who'd seen Marcus only as their teacher now understood him as a complete person, someone who'd loved, lost, and chosen to transform pain into purpose. As the final round concluded, the results were tallied. Brownsville Community Center had placed children in the top 3 of every section. Jamal had won the Under-10 championship. Keisha took second in Under-8. Even Maria had won her last game, executing a backrank checkmate that drew applause. During the award ceremony, Dorothy Washington stood beside Marcus and Victoria, handing out trophies. But the real moment came when Harold Whitman took the microphone. "Before we conclude," he announced, "the Academy has one more presentation. Mr. Marcus Washington, would you please come forward?" Marcus shook his head, but the children wouldn't let him refuse. They pushed him gently toward the stage, where Whitman waited with an ornate wooden box. By unanimous vote of the board, Whitman declared, "The Manhattan Chess Academy names Marcus Washington as Honorary Grandmaster and Lifetime Teaching Fellow. This title comes with full access to all Academy resources for your students forever." The hall erupted. Marcus stood stunned as Whitman opened the box, revealing a golden chess piece, a king, engraved with the words, "True mastery lies not in victory, but in lifting others."
Speech. The children chanted.
Speech. Marcus took the microphone reluctantly. The hall fell silent. "Titles," he began slowly, "never mattered much to me. But this one." He looked at the Golden King. "This one I'll accept. Not for me but for them." He gestured to the children. "Because it means they'll always have a place to learn, to grow, to become better than we ever were." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "A year ago, in this very hall, someone tried to humiliate me because I push a mop. But that moment led to this one, 300 children learning that chess, like life, doesn't care about your background. only about your willingness to learn. His eyes found Victoria in the crowd. Miss Sterling showed us that day what happens when we forget that everyone has value. But she also showed us something else, that people can change, can grow, can become teachers instead of judges. I am proud to call her my assistant, and my friend. Victoria wiped her eyes, not caring who saw. Sarah used to say, Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger, that every child contains infinite possibilities. Our job is just to help them see it. So to every child here, you are not where you come from.
You are where you're going.
And in chess, as in life, every move forward is a victory. He stepped back from the microphone to thunderous applause. Children rushed the stage, surrounding their teacher, their mentor, their proof that greatness comes in all forms. Later, as the hall emptied and Marcus returned to his janitor's closet to collect his supplies, he found Victoria there, setting up a chessboard. One game? She asked.
For all times, Sake.
Marcus smiled. Why not? But this time, we play as equals. They sat across from each other, the teacher and the student who'd become a teacher, the janitor and the Grandmaster who'd learned that titles mean nothing compared to impact. As they played, children's laughter echoed through the building.
Somewhere, Sarah Washington was smiling.
The Detroit Devil had found his way home, not to competition, but to community. Not to glory, but to giving. And in a maintenance closet of the Manhattan Chess Academy, two friends played chess while planning next week's lessons, building a future where every child, regardless of background, could learn that in chess, as in life, dignity comes not from what you do, but from how you lift others as you rise. The game continued deep into the evening, but neither kept score. Some victories, they'd learned, couldn't be measured in points. Dear friend, every day, we pass by countless individuals whose stories remain untold, whose brilliance stays hidden beneath uniforms and job titles. Marcus Washington reminds us that greatness doesn't announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it quietly pushes a mop, drives a bus, or serves your coffee. The next time you see someone in a service role, remember, you don't know their story, their struggles, or their secret victories. A moment of respect costs nothing but can mean everything. If this story touched your heart and opened your eyes, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can share more stories that challenge assumptions and celebrate the extraordinary in the ordinary. Because everyone deserves dignity, and anyone can be a teacher if we're humble enough to learn.